Today I'll be talking about some normal structures which are very easily identifiable on CT scan of the brain. Now, this is CT scan of the brain. When we notice, I'll be telling some structures. So, this is a posterior fossa, as we can very clearly say that this brain portion is divided into three portions. This is first portion, this is second portion, and this is third portion. So this is posterior fossa, this is middle cranial fossa, and these are anterior cranial fossas. So in posterior fossa, what we have is the brainstem and cerebellum. So we can very nicely make out these are two eyes, these are two eyes, these are the two eyeballs. So this is anterior portion or front portion, and this is the back portion or posterior portion. So we know that the brainstem structures and cerebellum will be in the posterior part. The occipital cortex will be in the posterior part. So this is all cerebellum, and cerebellum can be very easily identified by presence of foli or transverse sulci structures. So these you can see that this has a transverse foli. This is a typical portion of cerebellum. So in the posterior fossa, the most important structures are cerebellum, brainstem. Now, in brainstem also, we have midbrain, pons, and medulla. So we know that this is the foramina magnum through which the spinal cord emerges, through which the medulla oblongata continues as spinal cord. So we know this is a part of medulla. This is a part of medulla oblongata, which is the distal most portion of the brain. So we know that this is medulla oblongata. We can trace this in all the slides. Now, medulla oblongata, above medulla oblongata, what you get is basically uh, the pons. And now we can very easily identify pons because the pons is almost completely circular structure, and midbrain is like a butterfly like structure. So we can very nicely make out here, if you see, that this structure is butterfly shaped here. So this is more of a butterfly shaped structure. So this is midbrain, this is midbrain, this is midbrain, this is also a part of midbrain only, and which continues as pons. Now this is more of a completely circular structure. So this is medulla, obviously. This is medullary structure. This is medulla as well. Sorry, this is midbrain. Sorry, I'm extremely sorry. This is midbrain basically. Medulla we have already demarcated. This is midbrain. This is midbrain. And the complete circular structure which can be traced below is pons. So below this midbrain is this pons. This is almost complete circular structure. We can notice this is completely circular structure. Here also, this is all pons, and this structure is pontine and cerebellar connecting fibers. These are all fibers which actually connect pons to uh, cerebellum. Here also you can see this is the pontine structure, and this then continues as medulla oblongata. So this is medulla, this is pons, this is pons, this is pons, and this is midbrain structure. So you know this brainstem, behind the brainstem, this is our cerebellum. Cerebellum has two cerebellar hemisphere, one is left and one is right. And the midline structure which we can see here is called vermis, and vermis has much of a role in maintaining balance. So this is the central portion which is called vermis, and this vermis has effect or control on balance. Cerebellum has control over coordination of movements. So whenever there is damage to the cerebellum, we usually get intentional tremors and imbalance, ataxia. These problems can be seen with the cerebral affection. Now, other lobes like frontal lobe. We know this is the central sulcus because this is the largest sulcus or the largest gap. Front of this is all frontal bone. Sorry, frontal lobe. So this is all frontal cortex. So it is very easy to remember. Just find out the central sulcus, the largest sulcus, and in front of it is all frontal cerebral cortex. The same way, it is very easy to identify the occipital cortex. Find out the brainstem structure, and behind that you'll get all occipital cortex. So this is all occipital cortex. So this occipital cortex can be very easily identified. Just find out the brainstem structures, and behind that, whatever you get is all occipital cortex. This is how you identify whether occipital cortex is involved or frontal cortex is involved. Frontal cortex is involved. Now, apart from that, when we say that this brain is divided into anterior, middle, and posterior portion, this middle portion, this is all temporal lobe. So this is temporal lobe. This is temporal lobe. So this, when you trace these images, this is also temporal lobe, this is temporal lobe, this is temporal lobe, this is temporal lobe, this is temporal lobe. In fact, you can see this is a temporal horn. We call it as, it is a part of the uh, temporal lobe only. These are the temporal horns of which actually get connected with the lateral ventricles. These are the first and second ventricle. These are basically ventricles. This black structure is ventricle where we have CSF. So these are called first and second ventricle. So these are first or second ventricle, and these are connected with this temporal frontal cortex, or sorry, temporal cortex also. So these are called temporal horns, as this is simply continuation of this CSF containing bags, and these are called occipital horns because these are present in the occipital cortex. Apart from that, uh, when you are not able to see any ventricles, what you see is all parietal lobe. So these are all this is the highest or uppermost portion, and this is all parietal cortex. This is all parietal cortex. This is all parietal cortex. As you keep on getting lower, then only you can recognize the other structures. Like this is the occipital cortex. This is the occipital cortex. And above, as you go above, you can see parietal cortex only. So you can simply remember, when these ventricles usually disappear, whatever you get is all parietal cortex. This is all parietal cortex. Apart from that, you also need to understand some subcortical important structure. Among them, one of the most important structures are the caudate lobe, thalamus, putamen, globus pallidus, internal capsule. So for that, you need to have these ventricles. You need to see these ventricles. So these are definitely the first and second ventricle, and just beside or just below this, you can see this small almond like structure which is called caudate lobe. So you can very nicely make out the same structure here, which we call it as caudate lobe. So this is the caudate lobe, which is a part of basal ganglia. You can also appreciate here, if you focus, this is the portion of caudate lobe. This is the portion of caudate lobe. And caudate lobe has much of a function when we compare it for involuntary movements or subconscious movements. These are programmed in this caudate lobe. And just behind this caudate lobe, this is caudate lobe, and just exactly behind this caudate lobe, you can get the thalamus. So this can be very well appreciated here. Just see that this caudate is here, and here is basically thalamus. So you can see a larger almond shaped structure that is called thalamus. Here you can make out that it is thalamus. So this is thalamus structure. And if you can notice, Apart from these structure, if you can see, this is thalamus. Sorry, this is caudate lobe, thalamus, and this you have hypodensity in this area, which is called internal capsule. So this is the internal capsule structure, internal capsule. And outside this internal capsule, what we have is this globus pallidus and putamen, which we call it as lentiform nuclei or lensed shaped nuclei. So this is lentiform nucleus. So these are very, very important structure. I hope you understood these things well. And I'll be showing these structures again in different images as well. For now, thank you so much.